evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Comprehensive Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee. We will call the meeting to order, and the first thing that we will do is call the roll. So I will call the roll, and Sean is here tonight to help us take minutes and manage the online participants because Lucy and Melissa have 4th of July tomorrow, so they're not. So Janet Braun is not here. Sheila Rossi, here. Kristen Day, here. Leslie Albee Fields, here. Alexandria Levitt, here. Tom Afshar, here. Rich Elbaum, here. Tony Ho, should be arriving shortly. Jean Kim, Bianca Richards, here. Victoria Rocha, Dean Serwin, here. Julie Wang, here. And Jasmine Wong is not with us. So we do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is public comment on any non-agenda items, but items, topics that are under the purview of this body. In an effort to better manage the business on the agenda, we'll limit public comment at the beginning here to 30 minutes. It's probably not an issue. We did get one written public comment, which we will publish to the website and make sure you all get that as well. If you would like to make a general public comment, whether you're in person or online, if you're in person, fill out the form and leave it with Sean in the back of the room. And if you're online, you can raise your hand and Sean will let us know if there's anyone online that wants to make a public comment. Is there anybody with their hand raised? So we will close the public comment period because there is no one here who wishes to speak and make a general public comment. So the first item on the agenda after that is the reordering of additions or deletions to the agenda. Does anyone have any reordering of additions or deletions to the agenda? So hearing none, we will just continue with the next item. The next item is an action item. It's the approval of the Library Community Center Comprehensive Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee minutes from the June 5th regular meeting. Do we have any public comment on that topic? No. So we will, if anyone has any comments or discussion before someone makes a motion, any changes, edits?
I move to approve the minutes of June 5th meeting.
Bianca moves. Second. And Kristen seconds. So I will call roll again. Sheila Rossi. Same. Kristen Dubé. Yes. Leslie Albee Field. Same. Alexandria Levitt. Yes. Tom Afshar.
Yes.
Rich Elbaum.
Abstain.
Bianca Richards.
Yes.
Dean Serwin.
Yes.
And Julie Wang. Abstain. So I think the motion passes, even though many people abstained. I believe it passes. I might have to check, but we will say that it passes and also find out otherwise. So with that, we'll move on to the main agenda topic tonight, which is a presentation from the consultant for CORE. And it looks like we have Don Marquez, Vicki White, and Andrea Gifford, who are three of the main folks from our project team. And I am going to just turn that over to them because they are ready.
Can you open the Zoom thing?
Sorry, who's that?
Could you open the Zoom thing for Andy Littman?
Andy, Andy, I'm sorry, what are you asking?
I'm not on the Zoom call. I'm just gonna slide on there.
Well, you are on. Do you not?
Okay. I just can't see anything. All right.
No, I can see that.
Shall we proceed? I don't know, Andy, it sounded like you could see the slide, but maybe not the faces. Is that correct?
We'll just get started. I'm
Okay.
not sure what's happening for Andy, but let's get started. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Happy almost 4th of July. It's really a pleasure to be back and present to you our next meeting. The agenda that we have for you tonight is to review the schedule and the work plan, to give you an update and summary on our assessments, including the community needs, the building program, as well as the site assessment. And then we've come back with some revised site strategies, kind of revised and refined based on input that we collected, and want to review those with you and get your input on them. And then we do have a draft of our next round of community engagement boards as well. And then at the end, just summarize the next steps. And so, as you can see, based on our work plan, we are kind of wrapping up our needs assessment phase, kind of starting to really dig in and work hard on our site plan, refine the site analysis, identify those site opportunities, look at those development strategies, and towards the middle of this month, we're actually going to kick off our round 2 community engagement, all kind of working towards refining and developing a recommended site plan in September, and then trying to do final presentations in November. What we have just kind of outlined and worked with our project management team, both Kathy, Lucy, and Melissa, and tried to kind of outline the process as we're heading into kind of the final recommendations. And so what we're outlining on this slide, and I apologize, it was later in your deck, so it's slightly out of order if somebody is scanning through this. We thought it might make a little more sense to pull this up front. But for basically what we're doing tonight is we're hoping to get a preference or good feedback on both 2 options that we have. One is new construction and the other one is a partial reuse of the existing historical building. And then on August 8th, we're looking at our next ad hoc committee meeting. And then August 12th will be a planning commission study session. And then we will share with them the options and the feedback that the committee has given us on the site options and collect their input for consideration by the ad hoc committee. And then to do the same thing on August 21st with the Cultural Heritage Commission. And then on September 4th, after we've got their input, we can bring that back as well as an update on the community engagement, what we've heard so far in the community engagement at our September 4th ad hoc committee. Get additional input and direction for the refined site strategies before we come back with the final draft for the ad hoc's review on October 2nd, all lining up for the November 5th City Council meeting. And so that right now is kind of a more detailed strategy and schedule as we're looking towards kind of towards the end phases of the project. And so with that, we're going to go on to summary of the site or needs assessment and the building program, which we really dove in deep last time with you, trying to keep it a little bit higher level now, and the site assessments. And I'm going to hand it.
Just interrupt because I think people are having trouble finding the page. It's page 16 in the packet. So if you look at the bottom of the packet where it has page numbers, and the packet page 16.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
So that was the process slide that you just pointed them to, right?
The agenda slide.
Oh.
So they're back on track.
This slide, is this the one that you guys are looking for right here? The one we pulled up?
Yes. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. These are the same presentation, but mine's different. Sorry, I apologize. I'm not going to be very helpful in terms of keeping us on page.
That's okay. I was feeling bad about pulling it up, but it just, when we were rehearsing today, it's like, well, this doesn't make sense way back there. And we can come back and talk about it later too. And so if you're okay, sorry for kind of getting everyone off step here. But this is kind of the outline of the process now. We can revisit it as we look at site strategies after you've had a chance to think about it. happy to discuss it further. And so with that, I get to hand it over to Vicky, who gets to share kind of the direction as we're looking at the assessments. Vicky, you're on mute still, hon. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, not sure what happened there. But just was saying that this is information that we've shown in a few formats throughout the process, but this is kind of the final wrap up and to kind of refresh our memories before we talk about those site strategies. So as you remember, and as you helped promote, we did, our mostly city staff did a number of engagement events throughout April and May. And the final results of all that hard work that staff put in there was a total of almost 3,000 participants in the process, which is a really amazing number of participants for a first community engagement effort there. The total number of online survey participants out of that number was about 613. So again, that in-person work that staff did really paid off. Next slide. In terms of people being residents in those survey results, about 80% of the responses were received from residents, about 20% came from non-residents there. In terms of the distribution of where folks live, this is based on the online survey participants and the folks who marked dots on the map on the in-person versions, which was about 818 people. We had a pretty good distribution throughout South Pasadena there. So you can see each district within or each area within the city are your city council districts. And so they have about equal population, about 20% of the city's population. And all of the percent responses of folks participating there were in that ballpark. And they weren't too far off there. So that's a good result there. Next slide. Again, what were the results that we had? As you'll remember, we had several categories of uses or uses for spaces in the engagement here. So here are the top results for those different spaces. So specifically for the library spaces, the community's priorities were for books for all ages, quiet reading, work and study, and children's play and learning. I don't think any of those are too surprising there. For the senior and community center spaces, fitness and wellness was the top priority, followed by games and hobbies, a senior lounge, and senior nutrition and meals. Next slide. For the shared use spaces that would be surveying both seniors and the community and library users, the top priority was watching movies, performances, and music. The next was visual and creative arts. Third was lifelong learning and classes. And fourth was cooking classes. And in terms of the library park campus, the space around the library, those priorities were number one priority was to enjoy the existing trees. Second was attend markets and fairs. Third was attend community performances and events. And the fourth was to walk around the site. So now we'll go on to the assessments of the needs, the program for the new building there. So again, this will look a little bit familiar to you too. So as we discussed at the last meeting there, what we're recommending for South Pasadena in terms of library space to meet the community's needs is 1 to 1.2 square feet per resident. And we recommend that the new facility that is to that site standard or that space standard would include all major library program spaces. So adults, children's, all of those spaces there. There is one small change from the packet there highlighted in yellow. We had incorrect existing library square footage there. So that is highlighted. But essentially what we have right now in terms of the current population and space per resident is not quite 1 square foot per resident. And as the population grows into the future, that number will decrease to 0.9 square feet per resident. So what the
I think we have a question in the room. Can I just, can we interrupt?
Yes.
That's probably a good question. So first you have typical population as your 2020 base population between this slide and the next slide. So I'd like to first understand which one is the correct population assumption for 2020.
Sorry, Kathy, would you be able to repeat that? It's a little bit hard to hear. I heard it sounded like what the population assumptions are.
You change the slide to the next slide, you have two very different population numbers for 2020. So I want to first start with asking which one is the correct population number, is it 24,500 or is it 26,940?
Okay, I think we might have just had a small mix up there in terms of those square footage or those populations. I think it's the one that's on the recreation slide. So I think that was just a small error on our part.
That is very important because we have to make sure we're making calculations based off of population projections. So I'd like to make sure that we get that corrected. So
Of course.
great. So then my
Yeah.
question is, what did you use? What were your assumptions for developing the population assumptions for 2025?
We used in terms of the population projections. Sorry, I'm again not hearing all of it clearly, but if the question.
I'm going to be very straightforward on this. You have a population for 2020 is 26,943.
Mhm.
Population 2045, you have projected as 27,200. So
Mhm.
asking what is the basis for that assumption?
That came from your housing element, your current housing element.
So that doesn't make sense. We have 900 units entitled at this point. Currently, new units coming in, and if you actually look at like 2.5 per unit, that would actually give you another 2,500 or so excess population in the next few years. So that doesn't make sense that comes from our housing element.
Okay, well, it did come from the version that's currently online. It did look like there may be some work in process on that housing element, so we'd be happy to follow up with you afterward and make sure we have the most current version and update our analyses.
Okay, because regardless, I mean, you're showing basically we have a population of 260 people right now between 2020 and 2045. So I don't think that is correct.
Okay, duly noted.
Yes, slide 1 and slide 11, you have it as 2,700 new people. And in this slide, use the same population numbers, it shows 200. So,
Yeah.
are you assuming 2,700 new people, or are you assuming 263?
Let me try to find the spreadsheet that was the source for this information. Hold on just one second. I opened it earlier, so it's in my quick my quick find here. Let me just reorient myself to the spreadsheet here. Yes, these are the numbers that are available. So the 2020 population is from the US Census is 26,943. And then that the draft amended housing element that's available on the city's website has the 2045 population for South Pasadena as 27,200.
So, okay, I think that doesn't make sense at all. Because that would be saying that we're only expecting to have 263 more people, and we would have 900 titled units, so majority of the units will be populated.
Yeah, it sounds like this is maybe something that we can handle in a follow-up here.
That does impact the needs, so it's important to make sure that we get these numbers at least closer to.
Absolutely, totally understand.
I can follow up with the community development department and find out, how they got to that number in the housing element. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll be happy to update this analysis with that information and bring it back in August, if not sooner. In any case, based on this information that may or may not be correct here, the overall recommendation in terms of square foot per resident would still be the same here, and the math about how it'll work out in terms of that overall space for library needs may change there, but it would be in the range of, based on this current information, 27,000 to 34,000 square feet. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the recreation. So maybe could we go back to the previous slide? I think we were talking about the library. There we go. Thank you. So I think some numbers just got transposed here on this slide, but the recommendation for library needs is 1 to 1.2, slightly different than the recreation for libraries, 1 to 1.2 square feet per resident. And as we've noted previously, since we're looking at a co-located integrated library slash senior center slash community center, we would be able to have some shared spaces within that facility, like the lobby and the support spaces, the meeting spaces that would allow for about a 10% reduction in the total square footage requirement for those library spaces. Okay, now we can move forward to the next slide there. And again, we'll update these population figures here, but for the 1 to 1.25 square feet per resident for the recreation space needs, which is based on kind of national standards and comparisons, the need would be about 27,000 to 34,000 square feet. And again, this would be a bigger increase from what you have currently, which is about 8,500 square feet, or about half of a square foot per resident. Again, with a shared facility, we would be able to bring in about a 10% reduction for those shared spaces. As we also discussed at the last meeting, the library park site is kind of felt by the community to not be the right location for a gymnasium type use, which would be incorporated in that overall recommendation of 1 to 1.25 square feet per resident. So removing that portion of the requirement from the overall recreation space needs, as gyms are typically about 8,000 square feet, would take us to a recommended size or size for a shared senior and community center at Library Park to be about 19,000 to 26,000 square feet. Next slide. So putting these numbers together here, that would bring us to a total recommendation of approximately 46,400 to 60,000 square feet. And then taking out that 10% reduction that we discussed would remove about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, leaving us with a final recommended range for the co-located library and senior center of approximately 41,800 to 54,000 square feet. That recommended range, which we're leaving at a range, recognizing that funding has not yet been identified for this project, will allow us to maintain flexibility, but still provide all of the spaces that we see on the slide here. So that would include an outdoor entry and entry plaza, library spaces including browsing, group study rooms, adult space and an associated outdoor space, a children's space and an associated outdoor space, a teen center and library staff spaces, community center spaces, including a fitness and wellness room and associated outdoor space, a senior enrichment space, including outdoor space, and community staff spaces, as well as shared spaces, including a shared entry, shared community room with outdoor space, shared meeting rooms, and shared creative art rooms with all outdoor spaces, as well as the common support spaces, including janitors, restrooms, and the walls and circulation elements that would be dividing all of these elements. All right. Any questions?
Yeah. Where's the theater? We have a requirement to have a theater. I don't
Well,
see it here anywhere.
yes, well, that was included in that in the children's spaces here, and Kathy went back and looked specifically at the wording of the bequest, which I think I can find, but talks about a children's amphitheater story time space, and you know, kind of the literal definition of the amphitheater is really just that stepped seating element. So it sounds like there is some more flexibility to be indoor and outdoor, and discussing with Kathy what the library staff what the needs really are, that it would make more sense for that amphitheater to be an indoor amphitheater. So that would be accommodated within the children's space that we see here on the program.
I mean, it's too early to say indoor, outdoor, but the square footage accounted for.
Right. I'm not concerned about whether it's indoor or outdoor, although it'd be lovely if we had the flexibility, and that's what we consider. My concern is that theater, because it is specified in the bequest, which is our seed capital for the capital fund, I think it should be articulated on the list, anything that's available publicly. More than that, I think that children's amphitheater, while it can be designated as the children's amphitheater and get the name that has on the plaque, I think that that should be considered a shared use space and available to the senior center and use to use for the purpose.
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit more, and compare some, examples of what that typically looks like. But I think the most important thing is that we don't forget about that square footage, and we can certainly describe it in such a way that people understand that the Carlisle West is incorporated in that space. We can talk about whether it gets its own line item, but I don't think that's the intent of the bequest. It's a story room, is what it is.
My point is that it should be mentioned so
Yeah,
that no one ever
yeah.
questions. That was the first thing that I thought of.
Yeah, and I can jump in here too. We are happy to put it in kind of the summary when we do a more detailed slide presentation. We've kind of summed up all these spaces for tonight's presentation. And so even like within the adult space, you know, there's 3 or 4 different types of spaces in the adult space, from the quiet reading to the collection and all of that. But at this high level of planning, we've kind of rolled all those spreadsheets up, but definitely hearing the importance of making sure when we roll down that program that we include the amphitheater in the children's space. Happy to do that. Any other questions before we go on?
Point that I'm trying to raise is that that request is publicly known, and it has a specific requirement, and everything that we're looking at is available on the city's website and is publicly available. So I think that anything that is publicly available should highlight that in some manner so that anyone looking at it doesn't immediately say, what about the children's theater that got requested? So that's my point, is that I think that it's vital that it be included so that we don't have to backpedal all the time.
So this is simple. You just put on that line, children with separate spaces.
Yeah, it's that simple. So that there's just the word theater or story time, anything that someone can immediately key in. Please.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, now we'll move on to the site. So we've been talking in recent conversations, not just about the library site, but about the historic context that the library exists within. So we wanted to point out here that the library is within the South Pasadena Historic Business District / Mission West Historic District here. And is also surrounded by some other potentially historic sites are surrounding that. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail here. So specifically at Library Park, as y'all are very familiar with, the 1930 community room is the remaining part of the designated South Pasadena landmark of the library there. The Morton Bay fig tree is a designated heritage tree and a South Pasadena landmark. And then as we just showed, the Library Park is within that historic district that is a National Register listed district. And the library is also surrounded by an eligible historic district that is not yet designated, but for the library neighborhood. Next slide. So looking specifically at the building, you've seen these diagrams before, but we'll just go through a quick refresh. So the remaining historic elements of that 1930s building are shown in red and yellow. So the red is those elements that are of primary significance that are really the most significant to that historic character. The yellow contributing items are historic features that are slightly less contributing to the original construction there or slightly altered. So those are the elements that we're really looking at maintaining as we talk about reusing the potential partial reuse of the building there. So next slide. We've also got a couple other additional views there to clarify what we're talking about when we're talking about these contributing elements there. So the one on the top left there is the view from Oxley Street toward the building. So essentially the tallest portion of the building is viewed from Oxley Street is that historic 1930s element, which is surrounded by the kind of red bubble there. And then the lower two diagrams there are the views from Diamond and from Fairview from left to right there. And so you can see that the front building or the community room building is primary significance, as is the arcade or loggia or colonnade portion there. And the walls kind of behind that are of that secondary or contributing significance. Next slide. We wanted to look again too at the interior elements there, as there are some historic elements there. So we've got a view there. And we also thought it would be helpful to look again at kind of the historic uses of the building to understand kind of how these historic elements that still remain were originally kind of configured with the library use there. So you can see in the two images at the left that the library shelves were below the windows there around the exterior of the room with a central large circulation desk that is essentially where the kind of display alcoves are now on the center of the room opposite the door that faces El Centro there. So it's interesting to see how the building was configured previously. Next slide. So looking again at the area surrounding the building there on the upper left image there, you can see the two existing designated historic districts in dark blue there, the Mission West Historic District and the South of Mission Historic District. And then in light green is that eligible Library Neighborhood Historic District. And then there are a couple of non-historic buildings like the new school district building that's catty corner from the El Centro and Fairview corner there, as you can see there. See here, looking at the other, and it's worth noting too that the library neighborhood historic district buildings are of a slightly smaller scale than those commercial buildings that are to the north of the site. Next slide. So here's a little bit more information on the Mission West Historic District there. So I think the key point here is that Library Park is identified as a contributing property within that historic district, that its period of significance was from the late 1880s to 1925, and it maintains a concentration of commercial and industrial buildings that relate to that early small town phase of South Pasadena. Next slide. And looking a little bit more closely at those surrounding buildings. So right now this is looking at which are contributing to that historic district and which are non-contributing to either the Mission West or the Library Neighborhood District here. So we're looking here at the old school district building across El Centro from the library. And it's worth noting in this slide that it's about a story and a half in terms of size and scale for that. And we're thinking about compatibility as we're discussing kind of the scale here and the surrounding historic buildings there. So as I mentioned, one and a half stories there on the north side. And next slide. So looking on the west side now of that, we've got a Mission West Historic District listed property on the corner where the coffee shop is now, that two-story brick building. And then to the south of that, within the eligible Library Neighborhood Historic District, the first house to the south there is considered a non-contributor or non-historic there, but the four homes to the south of that are considered contributing to that potential historic district. And they're about one story in scale. And then across Oxley from the park there are some additional eligible contributing properties there, which go from one story on that Diamond Avenue corner to about 1 to 1.5 stories on the Fairview Avenue corner. Or sorry, two stories. That's what I meant to say, sorry. Okay, next slide. And then on the east there, we have some properties that are within that eligible historic district and contributing to that, as well as the newer townhomes. And they range in scale from about 2.5 stories on that corner of Fairview and Oxley there to, again, about 2 to 2.5 stories in the townhomes, depending on the grade. So we've got kind of a range of surrounding buildings ranging from, the 1-story homes up to the kind of 2.5 story scale buildings on that east side. Next slide. And I think here's where I hand it over to you, Dawn, to talk about that compatibility.
Yes. And so just as we look at the surrounding buildings and the surrounding neighborhoods and our site, what we thought would be interesting to try and share with you is just our thought process and analyzing the site and looking at the opportunities to access the site. And so as we look at El Centro, we do have the larger masses there. It is the commercial district, and the historical front door of the library was located facing El Centro. As we look at our fig tree, it's grown over time and really taken off a significant portion of the site, and something we definitely want to respect. And so just as you can see from this diagram, we have El Centro at the top, Oxley at the bottom. We have our crosswalks coming into the site, coming across El Centro to the site, as well as Fairview and Diamond to the corners. The 2-story masses with the new townhomes on Fairview, as well as the larger massing of the school district building on El Centro being across the corner. It really seems in our look at the site that the good opportunity for an entry to the site is really our prominent corner opportunity that we've identified there at Fairview and El Centro. It just creates a little bit more visibility to the building with the openness without the fig tree, as well as the massing. And it kind of is the high point of the site as well. And so as we start looking at our site strategies and refining them from what you saw last time, all of this information kind of feeds into our thought process as we develop these site strategies for you. Before we moved on, one of the things we did share last time was parking strategy options. And based on the good direction and discussion that we had at our last meeting, we've kind of come back with the summary of the parking strategies, and basically referring back to the city's downtown specific plan as there describes a vision for their parking, and then just identifying what we currently have for existing parking around the site, as well as the off-site parking structure. And so really relying on the city's planning and parking management plan that is all kind of evolving and developing to really help address the parking for the site. As we mentioned last time, by code, the district that we are in does not actually require any additional parking. So moving on to site strategies. Had a really good discussion last time, kind of went over our site development definitions, our building program definitions, and our site program definitions. Won't spend much time on those today. Based on your input and your discussion, we looked at 3 site strategies, site options. The first one was looking at demolishing the entire building and starting with new construction fresh on the site. The second one was to demolish the 1980s portion of the existing building and retain the 1930s building. And then the third one, the option was to retain and renovate the entire building and looking at making additions to it. And that was the one based on our evaluation and our discussion at the last ad hoc committee meeting that we were able to decide as a team that that wasn't a good strategy to pursue because it wasn't being able to meet some of the evaluation criteria and was creating very many limitations on the opportunities for operations and functionality for a new or in addition to the existing building. So based on that, we've come back with two strategies for each of those site options. Option A, I'm going to hand this over to Andrea in just a minute, was the demolition of the entire building. And option B was retaining the 1930s portion of the building. And so two strategies for each of those that we wanted to review with you tonight.
Thank you, Don. So we'll walk through each of the different options, and then we have a summary slide at the end where we can discuss and continue to evaluate the two options per option, so a total of four different strategies that we are reviewing tonight. So if we move to the next slide, the option, what we're calling development option A1, as Don mentioned, this one was where we do demolish the entire building. That building is outlined, dashed in red, so you can see where that existing structure was. As Don mentioned in the previous slide, when we were talking about our site opportunities, we really looked at anchoring the corner of El Centro and Fairview, relocating that building to that corner, creating a strong synergy with the old school district building on the opposite side of El Centro, but also creating a larger mass along El Centro and on that corner, and providing a new entrance on the corner, on that very prominent corner of El Centro and Fairview. It is the non-contributing historic portion of the site, so it gives us a lot of opportunities to provide a new look and feel to the library while still being sensitive to the historic neighborhood. And then using the natural grade of the site and moving the library along Fairview and bringing that down to the ground floor, really being sensitive to the neighborhoods as we move towards Oxley. The opportunity here is to really push the building towards the edges of the site to, as you see in the diagram on the left, really maximize the amount of park space in one central location. So rather than having the building in the center of the park with the park surrounding it, this opportunity really sort of pushes the building to the edges of the park and then provides a single large open space to the park with that fig tree really anchoring it in that northwest corner. You can see on the right meets a number of the evaluation criteria, and on the bottom is just sort of a kind of a section through the building. So if you were to sort of see the site as we know, the high point is on El Centro and kind of grades down towards Oxley. Here you can sort of see how this building sort of has the middle floor being the shared entrance highlighted in the bold yellow. And then you sort of move up to the second floor for the senior and community dedicated portions of the program, or move down to the more library dedicated programs. But they all sort of come together in this center shared entrance. We did provide two entrances, both being very street oriented on the corner, but also an entrance to the park. So we have dual entrances coming in and a shared entry experience, both of them relating to the two different sort of sides of this option. The little gray sort of circles are just notions of where we can make strong connections to interior and exterior spaces. So what this option provides is a number of outdoor spaces that relate directly to the interior programs along the southern and western edges of the building, all sort of opening up to that park setting.
Andrea, do we want to take questions or clarifications as we go through each of these at this time?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If there's any questions, and then as I said, we will come together and evaluate them using their evaluation criteria at the end. But if you have any specific questions related to A1, I think it'd be good to have those addressed now before we move on.
Curious, for all of the options, can you estimate or share with us how each one affects the size of the park? That is, for example, the one you're showing there, is that park, is that like more square footage than is current, or is it less? Just be helpful, because it looks like the size of the park varies significantly in each of these options.
I mean, the site isn't changed and the building are all the same square footage. So we're not necessarily increasing or decreasing the amount of park space. I would sort of say it probably looks larger because we've concentrated all the park into a single area. And so it probably appears as though it's larger because it's all consolidated into a single area. When you redistribute or move the park around the building, you have smaller areas that could be maybe used for certain programs, but may not be able to accomplish or accommodate large scale gatherings as you would if you sort of consolidated that park area.
Thank you. Optical illusion, I guess.
Yes, I believe that's what we're going. Yeah, it's, yeah.
I will say that we have laid out all of these site options for the 46,000 square feet. And so really tried to use the larger footprint in the range of the program size. And a lot of sculpting can happen. You know, we're at the very high level. And so if the committee's goal is they like one option, but they want to try and maximize more park space, you know, more of the square footage might be able to shift to the second floor so that our footprint gets smaller. We're really not at that level of detail yet, but I think with the committee's comments and direction, we can certainly try and accommodate some of those goals.
Okay. Any other questions?
You answered my question.
Okay. Great. We'll move on to option A2. Similar to A1, we are still in this A option looking at demolishing the entire existing structure. And again, you can sort of see that dashed in the red outline. But then in this option, we sort of wanted to keep the spirit of the center in the center of the park. So keeping the idea that this is it's a building in the park and that the park surrounds the facility. We still went back to the kind of some of those key kind of preferred site opportunities where we thought pushing the entrance towards El Centro and Fairview, towards that more non-historic portion of the neighborhood, was still a good strategy. And so here we've kind of pushed that to the eastern side, created a wonderful entry plaza again on that corner, an additional entrance off Fairview. So there's multiple ways to engage or enter the facility depending on where you're coming from. And then from that shared access point, you could then either move sort of up to the second floor for the dedicated senior and community, or through the shared area, move down to the lower level for the library, still having the kind of shared entrance and shared programs and experiences sort of more anchored on that eastern side. What this does, as you can see, allows us to have a number of outdoor rooms, again, indicated in those kind of gray circles with the little dot in them on the north side with park space surrounded them, or a couple opportunities on the south side adjacent to the library area where, again, the park is sort of anchoring or contributing to those outdoor spaces and providing a nice means to move indoor and outdoor. We wanted to highlight that while the library is on the ground floor, there's still lots of ample opportunity to bring in natural light. Maybe the second floor has a deck above, but still has wonderful skylights or ways to bring light into it. So you can see in the section on the bottom right, opportunities to bring it in light, not only in the shared space, but also through skylights into the library space, and make sure that that's a very well-lit, vibrant space to be. Any questions about the A2 scheme? Again, kind of bringing it back to the center in the middle of the park.
Vice Paul, I just want to clarify, when you said that those opportunities were indoor, outdoor, would that mean French door kind of thing, or the window wall that can completely open, that we saw at the, I think that was the Manhattan Beach facility.
Yeah, so both of those opportunities exist, whether it's a series of French doors or whether it's a single wall that folds away. Again, we're not sort of at that level, but we could see both of those strategies being explored within these indoor outdoor rooms. And again, these are diagrams, whether there's just 3 outdoor rooms or 4. We're really just sort of identifying the opportunities here. And then that level of refinement would come once the building program and budget gets finalized and the specific site strategy is identified.
Another question. Many of the libraries we visited had kind of wonderful sort of floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a really nice space and a nice view. As you've cited the different functions of the building, through the park, is there any difference between what the opportunities might be for having, a really nice thing to look out on or not as nice?
The more exterior skin you have, the more opportunity to have those views and large scale windows into the park. But that does come at a premium of a cost because your envelope or your skin of the building is the most expensive part of the building. But what we did try to do is, even if, as you see in this scheme, where potentially, one side of the library might be more within the hill, is really to look at strategies to still bring in light on the side that may not have that direct access to windows. So still making sure, can we still use 2-story volumes or those shared spaces to bring light into the center of the library? There's still wonderful ways through skylights and solar tubes to also bring in that. And then, of course, when we program these, is really prioritize the people spaces towards those exterior walls and look at those support spaces like mechanical, electrical, those unoccupied restrooms, things of that nature where we don't have windows would then be located in the portions of the library or portions of the building that may not have access to views or exterior windows. So there's lots of strategies to still maintain and create wonderful spaces without having 4 walls of windows.
One further question that I alluded to earlier, and it kind of follows on Rich's and my own. I noticed in the various drawings, they're all cubes, effectively. Was there any consideration given to something more U-shaped where there could be a shared communal space that all of the facilities utilize that's almost like a courtyard that would give an opportunity for an incredible amount of window wall area, open wall area to that almost centralized area.
That's what A1 is.
No, I know that's A1, but let me rephrase, that retains the building we're sitting in, because without this building, I feel very strongly we cannot do this project.
I think that's when we're gonna move on to B.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I think we have to discuss.
I don't see it be one of the two of us that change.
Yeah.
I don't understand, what's your point, Dean? Are you saying you want a courtyard?
I'm asking if that was something they considered,
I see.
a structure that could include some type of, something akin to a courtyard.
So Dean, I'm sorry, Andrew, I'll just jump in. I think you're talking about the B series where we're reusing the historical building. So maybe when we get to those options, we can address your question about our consideration of trying to create more of a U-shaped buildings or a building with more exterior window opportunities. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Any other questions on the A series, A1 or A2, before we jump into the B, where we retain?
I think that's a general question, and it could be getting too detailed. I'm just trying to confirm that in A1 and A2, there's only one way in and out the building. Is that right?
There are, in both of them, we sort of showed 2 large yellow arrows to get in and out. There will be other smaller exits that will still be required for life safety and exiting of the building. But as far as, the main public points of entrance, we are trying to really work on combining those 2 entrances from an operational standpoint. So the more entrances, the harder it is on staff to really survey and monitor all of those entrances. So if we start creating entrances on 4 entrances, one on every street, your staff are just going to have a really hard time keeping good sight lines and really being able to man and staff all of those entrances. And as we know, your operational cost will far exceed the cost of this upfront building. And we really want to make sure that we're being very sensitive to the library and community operations and staffing.
Makes sense. I just want to make sure because I just be a little particular. They're a little bit different looking. So it's like, are they important? Are they different? Is that a design element? So I just want to ask because particularly on A1, on the top left, there's a tiny little one. So I just wanted to point that out. I was getting a little confused. That's all. Because that would suggest a third one.
So that's a really good
Oh.
question. Yeah, and the top left one right here, it is dashed and it's a tiny little one. We were trying to indicate, Andrew, I think this is where we were suggesting in our discussions that this might be the larger community hall. And a community hall sometimes wants to have independent access. And so if the rest of the facility is closed on a Friday evening or a Saturday night and it's being used for a celebration or event, you can enter directly into that community hall portion of the community recreation center there and not go through the primary entrance and have to keep the rest of the building open and operational or surveyed. And so this is just suggesting that there could be what we would call an after hours access point, allowing for more flexibility in the use of the building, and again, trying to minimize that operations of it.
Thank you. Now I will pay attention to the little yellow.
You're very
Good catch.
good pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good pickup. Okay. And I think with that, we will go to B1 and you'll see the little dashed arrow in this one as well. So in the B series, as we discussed, we are maintaining the existing 1930s building. In the B1 series, we are also trying to maintain the existing colonnade. And so you can see kind of those two little skinny rectangles on either side of the 1930s building that is dashed in. And the idea here is that we would really use that existing building and the front of the building for our shared programs and entrance area. We'd create a new entrance and entry plaza, again on that El Centro and Fairview corner, but maintain the existing building and the existing entrance as we now alluded to, this little small yellow arrow that would lead to after hours use for potentially the large community hall. The colonnade would then, I think this was leading into Dean's question, could be used, that kind of courtyard space could be used in conjunction with that community room and provide a wonderful kind of courtyard feel as it kind of anchors the existing 1930s building. And then from that shared middle floor, we would essentially have a two-story addition behind it, with the library being on the ground floor and the senior and community dedicated programs up on the second floor. We would still provide accessible access to the old entrance as well. So just if as a minor point, that small little yellow arrow would include for after hours use would also make sure that we have an accessible entrance there. And then we'd maintain the park on the northern side and provide a number of different outdoor program rooms on the second floor and the ground floor through decks or ground floor outdoor rooms that connect to the south side of the site. Any questions on the B1? And so what's really important to know about B1 is it's a kind of a new entrance on the east side, maintaining the historic entrance as just for after hour use into that old 1930s building and to sort of potentially rehabilitate that building into a new community room. with the colonnade creating a wonderful courtyard for that space.
I don't understand the courtyard that you're talking about. Can you point it out?
It's a little thin black border. So like if there's a 1930s building and you have that little black border. So they're gonna do some type of landscaping right outside. So this will be like an immediate outdoor space. And this building after hours and shared library seems to close off. I think it's more the balconies.
Yeah.
It's the balconies, the two balconies on.
If you can, yeah, like if you can envision the two balconies, the space in the middle, like right now, it's like open space, double height space, but isn't that what we're talking about Route 4? Is kind of between the two balconies is this courtyard, right?
Yeah.
Really not clear. It's confusing that the yellow looks like it's all building. It's open.
I mean, where it's undecided.
Yeah, I mean, this is the meta, is that they would.
No, I just don't understand it. Like, this is the courtyard.
Open, it looks like it's open to the park space essentially. There's no way to wrap it inside the building, right?
You guys.
So
have
I'm
done-
sorry, are you guys talking about within the colonnade as you look at the section here? Let's see if I can get my arrow. You can see my arrow. This section is the colonnade right here, right? And so that colonnade is now going to be glass. It'll be infilled with the wall behind it. We can even, on a project we did with a historic building in Milpitas, and put actually like a tensile structure roof over it. So natural daylight came into that. And it was really this wonderful kind of courtyard feel, as Andrea described, but it was protected and conditioned space, but it had lots of natural light. And the thought is for this one that we want to keep that colonnade, celebrate it, but we want to make it usable. And so it may have small group study rooms in it, conference rooms around the edge, all kind of supporting that large community room, which we're kind of envisioning in an existing 1930s building. Did that help? It's hard to hear your comments, you guys. We're trying.
That's good. I've just never really seen the building, but I hear what you're saying and it sounds really great. So,
Yeah, if you go back to the ones that Vicky went over and go back and look at the elevations of the building, the historic drawings, that shows the colonnade really nicely. And I think that'll help you envision it. It's really overgrown and it's even hard to see the colonnade from the site as you go around it now. But I think those drawings from the historical elevations do a good job kind of describing the opportunity there.
And it's hard because the colonnade is sort of split between, it's very eroded when they made the 1980s edition, right? Because they kind of really
Infilled it, yeah.
a portion of it. And so what we're doing is trying to reactivate and open that up. And yes, enclose the colonnade, or at least in this scheme is enclosing it so that it can be used for programs and functions, either a pre-function space for the community room or a wonderful reading area or lobby lounge area. Really, a lot of great amenities can be and used within that shared kind of open courtyard surrounded by that colonnade.
and there's no access to the library any longer on Oxley, correct? In this version. Okay.
Correct.
That's correct. Andrea, the question was,
Yes.
there's no, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, it's just a single entrance again. To really kind of, again, think about the operations of the facility and how it can really be efficiently, from a security standpoint, manned with that single entrance. And again, these are just all up for discussion, and refinements and comments are is pretty much, what we're looking for this evening.
So the second story senior center, community center, is it above the library or is it above the shared space?
It is
the-
above,
is
it's
it
above the library and a little bit of the shared space, but the majority of it sits above the library.
On the side view picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the right
No,
where we build.
that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
one question I was struck by is, now, I guess I count as a senior, and I can walk upstairs, but, I noticed in all of your versions, the senior center is on the second floor, which is gonna require the senior to go upstairs, take an elevator, et cetera. So what was the thought process to do that?
I can chime in because that's really a operational request from the staff in that the library customer client base, we need to be able to exit people quickly. We can't have people that we need to get out of the building and they have to take an elevator. So that's my perspective on that. And I think, well, the senior center is not open to the public in the same way. I mean, it is open to the public, but they don't get hundreds and hundreds of people of all ages. Not frequently do they have people that they have to remove from the premises.
So I think that a rowdy senior is less likely than a rowdy.
Well, I think you're looking at statistically like volume across the hours of the day, right? So the library itself will be running more hours and having more throughput volume at all hours than technically the senior center.
I think that's
So if I could jump in here, you guys, but there is going to be an elevator that'll take you up and down, and the site does slope. And so as you look at the first option, A1 actually put the senior center up on that top, kind of fronting the street intentionally, just for ease of access for seniors and things like that. And so that one pretty much is at grade with El Centro as you looked at the A1 series. On this one, as you come into that shared space, you could see the stair going up, the stair going down, the volumes being connected with the open space there, and the section is actually taken back by the colonnade. So you can't, we didn't take a section at the new entry here, but the new entry would have the elevators that would take you either up to the senior community center or down to the library as well. And so all of these options will be accessible. And most definitely, will be ADA and have universal access.
I think that, option B highlights the big issue you have here, and I think I brought this up before. By maintaining the historic building, you lose a lot of the site, and everything has to be much more congested, and looks like option B1 and option B2 both rely on 2 stories, having the senior center on top of the library, which I realize that's probably a reality if you keep the historic building, but also we're missing out on a lot of opportunities. I think that we're going to be limited of height, volume, and it's just an unfortunate side effect of, but I do believe that the only option we really have is to keep the historic building. But just needs to be pointed out that we're looking at a 2-story building where option A really is a 1-story building.
I have a question on that. And I don't mean to be sacrilegious about this building because I've been so vehement about we have to maintain it. It's a cool building, but if we try to tear it down, the city will revolt. It'd be almost as bad as the trigger. I'm going to say 90% of the times that I've been in this room, that shade is down. There's a lovely window there. I've seen it once in 21 years. Is there a reason that we can't do something like A1, but instead of going to the street with a new building, have the part that's on this side be this building that then has another new building across it, and maybe that wall gets blown out and connected to that new building. Am I articulating that for you guys?
Yeah.
I think that.
You're basically saying, is there any way that he?
Can't hear you, we don't talk together.
Okay, so, I don't know if you guys can hear me. What I'm suggesting is that the east side of this building that we're in, be blown out and connected to a new building that is like the building in A1. That instead of it being moved up to the street, it's the part that's on the north side would be partly this existing community room that would then be expanded onto to create something more akin to A1, but maintaining this building. Is that feasible?
I think there's opportunity. I think what you're saying is in the A1 scheme, move the blue bar down and utilize the existing 1930s colonnade, if I'm understanding correctly, or the 1930s building, potentially not with the colonnade, as
What is the blue
this.
part of A1? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so to move the blue bar down and utilize that 1930s building as the senior community wing, I'm going to call it, and then put the shared entrance sort of just to the east of that, and then where the old senior community area is the library in an L-shaped configuration.
It doesn't work because in this A1 you have a second floor. So the issue here is, I mean, I really like your idea of a form like that, but right now if you look at this A1, it's still.
This scheme also loses a lot of the appeal that the community pointed out. They talked about doing the walk around the site. This really creates just one big park, but it's not the same experience that I think everyone.
I hate it.
Appreciates.
And
also, I think there are other options where you have really a central park and an Oxley Park, and then this kind of a connection between might actually work better for farmers markets and other events. I think that might actually be a more beneficial. What you showed option. I think A2 would be B1, B2.
Yeah, this is times the farmers market and there are people all around, all parts of it. So it's pleasant to see.
This I don't think would achieve the same experience.
I think if we dialed forward to B1, can you move to B1? It seemed in our community engagement that maintaining the historic character was, go back to B1, please. Maintaining the historic character was valuable. I think everybody's point is that when we envision a senior center, the seniors being able to access it easily versus it being a bottleneck point, waiting for an elevator to get up into the senior center as well as down out of the senior center seems contradictory to the idea of a welcoming senior center. And so the question that Dean puts out there is there any way to use that 1930s building section, which is a floor level entry, as our main senior center, so that the senior center has a way of having a street level entry?
It's still great.
So that's the question, right? Would that be in any way feasible to try to, because when you talk about like blowing out the east section, that section is like, that's actually the level transition, right? So is there any way to build any of this or that portion out such that the seniors could?
And I know
I'm sorry, we can't hear Dean at all now.
fixated on a U-shaped building. I did it with a big open courtyard that used for multiple purposes. This building being one arm of the U, go down from it, down Oxley.
Fairview?
Fairview, thank you. only lived here 20 years, I still don't know the street names. And then back, with a longer library, building, or even shared use part, so that the senior center along Fairview have an entryway, there's already an entryway on Fairview. Utilize to get into the senior center. Something along those lines that still gives us square footage, still leaves the ability to walk around the park, and it still leaves an opening then that would actually face out to more thick.
Are we, so I think we're getting lots of good comments and lots of good ideas to try and refine options further. Are we thinking, we, meaning the group, that the demolition option, I mean, I heard somebody say, you know, that the A1 and A2 demolition the entire building is probably not politically feasible, in my words, not somebody else's words. But if, you know, if we're hearing comments for the B series and how we might come back with refined options for the B series, I think we can take this. If we're hearing a combination of comments referring to the demolition option, the A series and the B series, it's a little more challenging for us to follow your thoughts. So can someone or the group, you know, maybe try and clarify that?
I don't think anyone is considered the
A series is not feasible.
I'm not quite there yet. I think, I mean, we've essentially demolished the original, building year before, just took some parts and reassembled it. Why couldn't we do that again?
That's not what happened. This building was built in 31. This building wasn't touched in 19.
Well, but some of the original Carnegie elements were repurposed. It was moved from the corner over here to here. So it was that. I think it's worth exploring. I mean, if, you know, we could find out really quickly what the community thinks. But I wouldn't just dismiss it.
You can find out what the community thinks. I do agree with the majority of sentiment here that I don't think it's feasible from what I've heard from community members.
But then we have to realize that by going down this path, you are faced with much more difficult decisions in terms of busing, in terms of access, in terms of second stories, elevators, and all that. And if you're okay with that, then that's fine. But it's just there's an opportunity cost by not demolishing the original building. You lose a third of the site, and that's just the fact.
Are we saying that the community would not want, they would want this building to be as is completely?
No.
Are we saying that we can move things around? Like,
I
for
think
example,
the facade piece.
if we can keep the facade at workable.
Yeah, like I think to Dean's point, like having something on this side, you could actually do that on this side. You can't go the other side on the tree. That people have already told me they would change that.
So is there a way to achieve the senior center being at least entry level where it's essentially an access on the first floor while manipulating this building to maintain the historical elements to meet the community's needs?
I think just based on what I see here in these studies, I think the team arrived at the conclusion that if you in order not to affect the park all that much and still maintain the park, you really don't have the area to put both the senior and the library on the ground floor.
That was gonna be my exact question, actually.
It doesn't seem like it was feasible. You would basically have the entire site like this, bottom 2/3 with building.
Yeah, that's what was gonna be my question. We're talking about on the Oxley side, I don't know if you can hear me, but.
Yes, we can.
Is there room to put that blue box kind of right under, not underneath, but kind of underneath the library box? Is there enough room in the park to do that? Square footage, right?
So right now, just based on that diagram in the section, see the dashed lines to the blue box? And so this is the second floor on top of the library and it's dashed over. These two volumes, they could be switched with putting the senior community center on the first floor, but operationally, just the ability to exit uh, security issues or concerns in the library, being able to get people out quickly through exit doors and things like that before they become a problem operationally, was the
Not her
reason.
question.
Yeah, Dawn,
I think she
she's,
may. Yeah,
yeah,
go
she's
ahead.
All right.
asking whether the library and the senior community center can both be on the ground floor. And we could definitely do that, but you would lose park space.
Yeah.
So you would sacrifice, what we're trying to
Thank you.
do is try to maintain a similar amount of open space as you currently have, which is why we keep kind of showing the red dashed line. We want to make sure like that we're not taking away the park for the building. So we're significantly increasing the square footage. And so if we were to put everything on the ground floor, you would sacrifice some of your park space.
We're gonna have to make a sacrifice.
So there are trade-offs, but I want to go back to the operational issue for a second. You did your operational assessment. You were looking at daily output and management of daily operations for the library. Is that correct? That's how you said library on the first floor? Let's say yes or no.
The staff in our last project management team meeting with Lucy and Melissa and myself, we talked about that, and they had actually had, I think, two different versions, one on top, one on the bottom, and I said, we think that the library would be better on the bottom for operational reasons, but I also understand this idea that the seniors need a.
So what I'd like to know from an operational standpoint, when you have 100 seniors here for lunch, there's an earthquake, what's your plan to help evacuate?
The same plan we would have for evacuating anybody that's on that second floor.
Yes, there's a difference.
It's hard.
It's completely
Yeah,
different.
no,
When you have 100 seniors who have mobility issues,
Yeah.
what would the plan be to evacuate?
Well, you're gonna have 100 kids that you need to
Yeah.
Well,
From
So from a programming standpoint, from the way that the large program room is on the ground floor, is in the shared area. So any of the large senior events or programs that would be happening would be in the existing 1930s building. What would be up in the senior community area would be their smaller lounge and program rooms that are limited in occupancy to probably about 20 to 30. So we wouldn't be talking about large events ever being up on the second floor. We'd be talking about some smaller programs that might happen up there or social lounge spaces. And we would want to put those as close to that entrance elevator stair as possible. So if you were to think of, the blue bar, the senior program spaces as we would normally lay out would be the closest to the stairs and elevators and evacuation points. So they would be the first ones to be at that sort of within those areas. So that's just kind of our best practice when we lay out programs. But again, large 100, 200 program events would be on the ground floor in the shared program spaces.
There's a kitchen down on that first floor as well. I mean, so
yes.
Programs
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So we would, yeah. We have done senior lounges and program rooms up on a second floor. And what we've learned is sometimes putting them right near the entrance with an elevator is fewer steps than having them at the far end of the yellow bar. So if we were to put them in the colonnade, the distance to go from the front door all the way to the senior lounge would be far greater than if they came in, entered directly into an elevator, moved up, and left the elevator and then entered into their lounge space. So sometimes the distance to their space is shorter if it's closer to the entrance, even if it's on the second floor, than if it was on the far end of a space. So that is something that we would look at when we start laying out those spaces.
From an operational perspective as well, then are you looking at in the B2 and B1 basically having a shared staff for the senior center / library for check-ins, and the seniors would be coming in the same space of the library? Right now we have two separate completely two separate spaces. So I think that's part of the confusion when you see a blue box here, this is senior center. It's trying to understand, are you changing operations so that basically we should staff?
That's a good question. I think that our vision was that, yes, we could share an entry, but I think from my perspective, that's sort of my issue is right now we can keep those populations separate and keep the seniors safer in their space. But if we all come into the shared entrance, how do we still kind of segregate the seniors so they are not getting all of the population that comes to use the library and wandering into their senior center? So to me, that's something I think about. But yes, I think operationally it would be different because we would look at a shared entrance. We don't have to do that, but I think that was one of the shared.
Sure. So was the challenge on these conceptuals, because we are such rough sketch conceptuals, is understanding that flow between now it's saying, oh no, this seems actually to do large programs downstairs. It's on issue, but it's only tiny things upstairs. So it's understanding where that flow is happening as far as intake for the seniors library.
I think would help if we understand how the program is laid out, because I think some of the library program could be on the second floor, maybe some of the admin functions. And maybe that could be a combination of maybe some senior functions are on the ground floor, some library functions on the second floor.
So I think the microphone to Tom, I think that will help. I don't think they can hear you at all.
Understand some of the programs, of the major program elements in these boxes, and that might be going too far yet, but I see some opportunities to have library functions on the second floor, some of the admin functions, for example, and maybe that would free up some space that for senior community center functions to be on the ground floor.
That's a good point. You know, like the library workrooms are on the second floor. That staff are up there doing something, then that maybe opens up space on the first floor for other types of things for seniors.
So maybe this is just too the blue and the green, maybe they're commingled a little bit more.
One half is library and senior, so that's it's not a whole.
I think what it sounds like is that we need some more options in the B series to play around with our desire to ideally keep some of the 1930s portions as well as prioritize the seniors having an entry-level entrance, knowing that while this is super meta, we still need to be able to conceive how we're going to logistically work through this shared space in terms of volume and access, as well as workflows. So I think we need just more.
Yes, and our intention is to come back with refined options for the selected series, if you will, Julia. So I think, sorry.
This contract is specifically to needs assessment, right? So part of that needs assessment is on the operations side and making sure that it makes sense in operational flow. So what I'd like to see is not just these sketches, but I'd like to have an understanding of what the operational flow would look like for this.
And so to that point, that was one of the things that I was assuming was done in deciding first versus second floor or which rooms go where is operationally. I would be interested in knowing, volume wise, right, throughout the day, which populations demographically are coming through, right? Because we know there's certain time periods where it's the moms with the strollers and the little kids that will be requiring an elevator versus there are times of day, especially regarding like meal times, right, that we have seniors accessing like larger group meal accesses. And so I think it would be nice to have some more details, which could help us figure out how the physical plan would be affected by the actual flow of which portions of the populations at different times of day. So to that end, is that something that you guys would be able to come back with?
Yes, I think our intention is to come back based on your comments today with refined option. We were hoping that we would be able to get down to a selection of either the A series or the B series tonight, carrying, 5, 6 options forward. is challenging and is probably, um, something that is more detailed than can be accomplished at this level. I do think the comments we've heard so far in terms of wanting to have the senior community center at a ground floor level for ease of entrance can certainly be accomplished. I mean, even just on this diagram, we can look at taking some of those shared spaces up to the upper level and putting more of the community center spaces on that, what we're calling the gold level, right? And so that's a little bit easier to break up potentially. And that kind of comments and suggestions for us is very helpful. Um, Coming back with a floor plan diagram of each of the spaces and an operational layout is.
I'm not asking for that.
That's fine. Yeah.
When I've gone to plan out medical facilities, you actually go through and walk through operations first. So what I'm asking for is to have an understanding, because when you say shared and shared entrance, but it's not clear then who's going to be there for the entrance piece. So that I need to have that understanding as a question. So this right now, if you want to communicate it out to the community, it doesn't make sense. And I know it might make sense to you, but it wasn't making sense to me. I didn't understand what this courtyard thing was and whatnot. So making sure it makes sense is where people are going and where they're actually having, when you say shared, well, where would the seniors be having their lunches? That's one of the biggest things that they have, right, for our senior community. So
Absolutely. Yes.
We didn't mean that the second floor would be where they'd be having their lunches. We meant that that would be a little hangout space and like where they do some classes. So that's hard for me to make that translation without some explanation on what's happening. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Operationally, your diagram right now is not accurate because that shared space doesn't actually tell us that the seniors would be there because that's where they're having a meal and that's where they're having lunch. I'm not seeing on your diagram right now, this is where the kitchen would be. And a basic, obviously it's not the end all in the design, but it's hard to see based off just saying it's shared, what that means, what that space means. So that's where the conversations are coming. If majority of the seniors are coming in today, they're not really going to go upstairs because that's where they do some classes. That's different, and that makes B1 more possible. Right, but I think.
Okay, well, we can certainly come back with more detail. I think we have defined the shared spaces in the program summary. These are color coded. The gold color is in the program summary that we went over a little bit earlier in the presentation, and we can put those on the sidebar and we can diagram them on this diagram so that you can see which spaces are the shared spaces. And we can even map what activities might happen in each of the shared spaces so you could see where the senior lunch is and things like that. That's all certainly something we can come back with additional detail for these options or refined options with.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Like, so Sheila, like if you can come back and you can bring in the page 7 and 8, right? The survey results. Right now the survey result says senior community, right? This tan, 1 is fitness, 2 is games, 3 is senior lounge, 4 is nutrition and meals. So to your point, the lunch that is being served. Like I would like to see senior 4 and where in this rough picture senior 4 would be happening versus senior 1 or senior 2.
Yeah, and the point is the color coding doesn't match what's.
So I think the color coding, and we don't have to, I mean, the color coding is on the program summary slide that I was referring to, not necessarily the feedback from the community. And I can go back to that, but.
So going back to what we're talking about.
Yeah, slide 14, I believe,
Is under senior
in the packet.
Right, so nutrition and meals is under seniors and community. It's not under shared spaces. So I'm not sure how people would make these connections.
Yes. Yeah, we can certainly come back and clarify where the spaces are in the program spaces and what activities. We can do that.
So under your shared spaces here, right in this slide, nowhere does it say that that's where the senior meals would happen. So the assumption, going back to your graphic, is that all of the senior activities are basically happening upstairs.
Yeah, we need to break down the color coding on the diagrams.
Kathy, I want to make sure I fully understand all of the staff's concerns about what kind of your decision to recommend the library on the ground floor. See, what I heard earlier was it sounded like concerns about if there was a security issue, and I can understand that. I also think there may be other solutions to that then. But are there additional concerns? Because you also mentioned making sure the seniors aren't kind of jostled too much by the library population. Could you just kind of briefly describe all of the staff concerns and the issues I want to make sure we can address?
Well, I don't know that I can do this at that point. What I will say is that when we were looking at these diagrams, it was boxes. And so when you're looking at the two, and we had two boxes like that, I think the library should be on the bottom. So if that's what your choices are, that's not what our choices are. We did two, we just established that. Do this, or we could have this upstairs. So when I said, oh, I think that box needs to be on the bottom, it was literally just that box. So if we're able to, change the way things are, the thing that the library, well, again, I don't want to speak for the senior center folks or the community services folks for sure, but my experience is that the seniors, their space is a lot safer and a lot more homogeneous in terms of who's using it. And right now, they occasionally get people that are not senior center members, but not particularly frequently. And once we've kind of mixed some of this up so that people are coming in together and having options about where they go, I just want to make sure that think through, and that's, again, the architects would have to do that, but think through how do we make sure that the seniors continue to have the kind of environment that they enjoy and have their private protected kind of space. And then again, it is an issue for the library to be able to rapidly exit people, for the police to come and get someone out quickly, which is less likely in the senior center. But again, the recommendation that the library be on the bottom is literally, when we saw it, what we see now, which looks like a box. So if it's a box in a box, then, but it doesn't have to be a box.
Sure, that's
So it's down. Yeah, so it's from the senior.
I understand. I just want to make sure that we understand all those things, and then I kind of really want to ask the consultants if they can kind of figure out ways that we can have both. I got to think that's not going to be that complicated, but I also remember the Mission Viejo one. They had sort of separate stuff for seniors, but also again, so it is kind of the point you raised about seniors concerned about safety or not wanting to be jostled is an important one. I think there are ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think the idea with this is also not to segregate the seniors, right? They're segregated now in their own place way over there, and they don't see anybody else. And maybe some of them prefer that, but I think the idea is to try and integrate these populations. Also because the seniors are there, they're gone by 3 o'clock. Like they're not really there after that at all. So, and they also have people who come in there whose security needs to get called for as well, and they're used to that protocol. So, yeah, there would be things that would happen, but also I think we're seeing more younger people use the senior center, like people in their 60s, and so I think having mixed generations makes that more appealing as well. But I mean, yeah, so these are all things to keep in mind.
I think it sounds like a yes and thing.
And I think, Alexander, to your point, I can only speak for myself. I would be far more inclined to utilize the senior center facilities if I didn't feel like I was going into a room that is only seniors.
We want you there, Dave.
Yeah. So my question is.
A few short years, we're all in that room.
I want to ask a question to the group 4 and to Tom and to anyone else who has been silent. There's like 3 of us that are talking, almost 4 of us that are doing all the time. Is there anyone aside, and I'm not segregating you out, but you're the local point for A. Is there anyone else here that thinks that A is viable and should continue to be considered? Because what I heard group 4 say is, we can give you more options, but we can't give you more options for both.
I'm looking at, I could look at a demolition. I just think when you look at, we're sitting here in this space, this is a huge, I think, wasted space.
But it's terrible. I
Yeah, in the south.
It's just terrible. I mean, it's terrible feeling about the space.
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree, for example, A1, I think we can all agree that's not going to be a suitable solution. If we can guide them saying, you know, that's not something that we want to explore further. If I'm the only one here that.
Well, you're obviously not.
Well, what were their results? I mean, I think we had brought up the historic factor, so I'm just wondering, was this anything, like, cause, you know, there's a report on the page from the consultants that recaps which parts were historic as to when and why. So is all of this completely legal to raise if we needed to? Or what's
there was about us meeting, there was some discussion about the colonnade. And I think we agreed that the contributing elements could be removed, right, the colonnade. And I think that's option B, too. I don't think we've really heard about that option yet.
I mean,
Haven't gotten there yet.
I think if we, you know, repurpose the stained glass window to somewhere else, it can easily be done.
Maybe we should
It's-
talk
it's
about
a-
B2.
Yeah. I haven't talked about the last one.
Can we go to B2, maybe?
I
Okay.
think let's understand, I know I struggle with what's ground level, what's, you know, when I'm looking at this, I have the elevation on the side, but I'm having trouble when I'm looking at the top down, kind of knowing, you know, what's, I don't know, I struggle to conceive it a little bit. So just help us understand like what's high and what's low.
Will do. So the last option that we created was option B2, which does retain the existing 1930s building, but does not retain the existing colonnade. The big difference here, what we wanted to do is explore and get the committee's feedback on reusing the existing 1930s building as the main entrance, and then retain that a building and then use that for a series of shared spaces that then would lead to both a ground floor library and then up to a second floor senior and community room. So as Kathy said, this is sort of like a split level, sort of like if you think of a split level, you come in at grade at the 1930s building, and then you can either go half a level down to the library or half a level up to the senior and community dedicated spaces. Because the library is on the ground level and we wanted to make sure that we still have some presence on Oxley in this one, we did keep an entrance on that lower level on the ground floor of the library that then would bring you up through that space and then would have to continue up to the senior and community. Now, based on some of the feedback that we heard, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of input on, you know, again, the seniors being up on a second floor. But this is the diagram that we had created. And I think what we'd love to hear between B1 and B2, regardless of, you know, how we then sculpt the senior components of the blue bar into more of a level that's at grade, right? Which I'm sure this feedback would get. And we're happy to come back with this option to address that, is whether we like the idea of the main entrance still being at the existing 1930s building, or whether we appreciate or like the idea, like we showed in B1, where we create a new entrance to the east of the existing building. Those are the two kind of big differentiating factors between B1 and B2, is how we kind of use the 1930s building. Either as, again, as shown here, the main entrance, coming in at the entrance plaza, or in B1, where it's sort of a destination that you get to from a new entrance. So two different ways to think about that building. and how that gets incorporated into the design.
I like the idea of having the main entry point on El Centro, just because it's the more commercial side. I think maybe a secondary entry on Oxley is fine, but it is more residential community, so it's probably better to have the main entry point on El Centro.
So I'm gonna ask the operational question again though. So you have the main entrance on, if you have this room be the main entrance, what happens to the space as community space? So where do you put people if you have a larger event?
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. It looks like B1 looks like it has more shared space at a ground level, whereas this one looks like when you say senior community, up is the big community room that we all use upstairs.
Right, so obviously if you're having this be an entrance library, that would mean security at that space, because of the folks, people come in and out, similar to like we currently have the library. So it would change this and take it away as being a space for the community to have the community meetings and events, right?
I'm sorry, can you say that last piece again?
So if you have this room that we're currently sitting in.
Yes.
As the entrance, the operational entrance, that would be where people are checking in books and checking out books and going through all that space. This removes this space as your a community meeting space, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So then where would that community meeting room space be?
I'm not sure if we really got to that level of detail. I think what we were trying to do here is just kind of capture the idea of where that main entrance and how we would kind of result in that. So I think that's a very valid question. And I think if there's interest in this concept, that's where we would come back at this at the next meeting and sort of share, as we would with any other options that we'd like to continue forward with, is how we break down and those individual shared spaces and where those programs and activities would happen. So I said, like I said,
the community doesn't have very many meeting spaces. We have this room right here, and we have the War Memorial with two for the entire community. So I think the question that I have, and right now we have the seniors are having their lunches in another community space. So we have a shared space, wanting to make sure that it's something that is really usable for meetings, events. So that's what I'm trying to, it seems
Yeah,
like
and I think what Andrew is saying is the square footage here is the 46,000 square feet. So those program elements that make up the 46,000 square feet include all those program spaces that include the community hall, the community center program spaces, the senior lounge. It includes all those spaces. I think at this high level, you know, if the interest is to retain the ceremony, the historical entrance off of El Centro, make it accessible and have that be the main entry through the historical building. We can repurpose that to be the community living room, the community lounge, you know, all different things. And we can come back with an operational diagram that lays out those spaces and shows you and can answer these questions that you're raising right now, which are very good questions. It's just the next level. It's the next iteration, if you will.
But I think one of the challenges of this model is that by having a single entrance, see this one has two entrances, but by having a single entrance, but then wanting to keep the seniors separated from the library, something's not making sense in this model. So if you're having a community event, you have to go through the library to have a community event. So if somebody wanted to rent out the space to have a meeting or luncheon space, now they have to go through the library to do that.
I think the entry is shared, like it's an entry point for everyone, and then you go where you want to go. But I think your point is really good. We're not trying to segregate the seniors operationally, or, you know, we want the multi-generational thing. So I think it's just a matter of playing with these spaces and like you said, Sheila, having a better understanding of what do we mean when we're talking about those shared spaces? Like, what does that mean? Is that the big community room or those classrooms? Because that's the whole point of this, right? Was that we can gain more functionality if we find a way to share spaces. So like, we want to be able to use the classrooms at night. They want to be able to use them in the day. So they can't be on different floors because we won't be able to do that. So the shared space is really like the most important piece.
I think we don't fight more misunderstandings. So the examples we went to, we did a couple days of travel, right? Different examples. We didn't really see a library, senior center, community center combo, right? We saw senior center, but we didn't see the library and senior center combo. So the library, from an operational standpoint, has certain activities, the way you have a desk, right? A check-in desk and check-out desk, and we need to get their books, and it's not. So that's the piece that's different than every model that we've seen, and understanding where does that desk sit in this, if we're trying to do a shared space model, like how does that flow and traffic flow work? Just, and I know
Yeah.
it's a new
And that,
model, but we
and that's
work-
and that's what we want to bring back and share with you at the next meeting. I think, as Dawn said, is we have 4 very different strategies here from a site perspective. And what we're trying to gather is from a site perspective and from a very high level about library and senior community spaces and shared spaces and entrances on corners or buildings here, is to sort of get some feedback on how we approach this facility from a site perspective, how it fits into the park, how it addresses the park. And then once we've got this narrowed down to either the A or the B, then we can come back and really, now that we've got the building sort of sited in the park and we know where the entrance is and how we want to integrate, we can come back and then say, okay, now we know this is exactly how these program smaller elements are going to fit within this overall site strategy. So we definitely want to address, and these are all great feedbacks because we're like taking notes, and then we'll be able to answer these next time when we come back. We'll already have some of these comments, but we're not showing it at this level. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer some of these questions, but what we would like to do is to go through these site options and sort of get this from this, 20,000 square feet, high level, looking down at the site, how we want to approach the site, demolish, retain. If we retain, do we want to reuse the old building as the entrance? Do we want to build a new entrance to sort of keep the building? Maybe both of those still are excellent strategies that we want to explore to just get us a little bit more into a smaller collection of options. So then we have the ability to come back and bring you like 3 or 4 options of how the site, where the large community event would be, where the library would be, where that main circulation point for the library would be situated, where would the senior reception desk be located in its senior components. And those are things that we can address in the August meeting once we've kind of narrowed the site approach down.
I just want to make a couple of points on what I like about option B, where we have kind of a separate park area for Central and Oxley. And I like the idea that you still have an opportunity to kind of walk around the library park. I think from a programming perspective, it might work really well to keep them separate. I just, the way I see it, doing farmers market, the people that spill over from the market into the kind of the central side, and then you have a more
He said there are 2 separate areas.
Yeah, there's 2 separate areas, and
the families, the little kids are up here, older kids are on the central side, on the opposite side. I get it. It does lend itself to 2 parts.
And as long as we still have the opportunity to kind of walk around the park, I think a lot of folks, I see a ton of people. I live right around the corner. I see a ton of people doing their daily walks.
And we lose the direct sidewalk.
Yeah, it needs to be an experience. You don't want to just walk on the sidewalk.
I feel like if you look at like B1, the building is very similar to the current footprint, except we actually gained park space over there. Whereas this one now, the building's going all the way up to the sidewalk on the east side. So if you're looking to keep this outside park piece available, it seems like B1 is closer. You're actually
I think there's still opportunity in B2 to achieve that. It seems like there's still some space. It's not all the way to the speed.
I personally would love to see a very creative option of using this entrance. I don't know why it was not used, and that I think, well, it's interesting when this was all built, they decided not to come through here. So I think that's an interesting point that they're like, we're gonna make all the entrance over here. However, like every time I pass here, my heart wishes I could come through this way. So I would be really curious to see, as she said, operationally, how does this work then if you come in here or if we come next to it?
I think the issue is the grades of the site. The site's sloping down, and this is being raised. So there's operationally, it's difficult to make accessible paths of travel to this space.
I think it's hard for us to give you the answers that you're looking for on what our priorities are for the site approach, because we want to jump straight into the nitty gritty, like, well, what's the trade-off, right? Because I know it would be easier for you guys if we could say, oh, historically, we must keep the 1930s building. We would love to have the 1930s entrance, and then we could give you all the other things that we need, which is entry level for the seniors, and we would like to be able to walk around the whole block. And we would like, you know, the El Centro side park access for the farmers market and the other side. I mean, it'd be nice if we could see all those, but we don't know what the trade-off is. I think
Okay.
that's stuff.
And I think if we needed to carry B1 and B2, I think we can definitely do that. If we want to understand what the trade-off is between a new entrance versus the existing entrance, that is enough to know that we're in the realm of B. I think the only other difference between B1 and B2 is the colonnade, and if we want to keep that or not, but I think we can also carry both of those unless there is strong thoughts about having or not having the colonnade.
I think
Yeah,
it's
lose
Tom.
the colonnade,
Yeah.
you know, nice building, but I gotta say, Tom, I think you convinced me that this building could.
Well, I was just gonna offer you, I'm gonna show up to the Cultural Heritage Commission and make my pitch. I'll get shut down, I'll be quiet forever.
I'll come with you.
Well, I
If
also,
we could retain, if not these exact windows, something that mimics this. And I like the rafters.
I think to Tom's point, we could get faked out pretty well. As in, like, if you could, like, for example, the colonnades, right? Like, I gave you another set of colonnades. Could any of us, like, identify that they're the incorrect colonnades? Like, if you just close the stuff up and shrink wrap, build whatever you build, and you put some colonnades somewhere, and you told me these are the 1930s colonnades, you could probably sell me on it if the rest of it is all super funky.
Well, good thing John's not at the meeting. He would be rolling over. He would be rolling over. Good thing he's on vacation. I think we need to be sensitive about what is historic and what is not historic, and not trying to mimic or make something that people don't know the difference. So the big thing is even in the B1 option, you will see that the entrance is pushed back from the 1930s facade. This is a big element that John wanted to make sure from a historical standpoint that any new additions to this building are clearly not competing with the historical elements, and there's always a sensitivity. I know there's lots of talk about blowing out the east wall. I think we'd have to talk to John about how we would propose a scenario like that, and so that will be something we'll get his feedback on and come back with if that is something that's feasible, that can be acceptable from a historical standpoint. So I think we'll sort of talk with him and explore. And again, like the two entrances, maybe talk about the trade-offs between keeping the colonnade at the next meeting as well.
Can I just say, I mean, this can be a beautiful, like, built space, and when you look at fancy new buildings, they have, you know, atriums with light, and when they did this library in the 80s, they made the darkest, pokiest, lowest, gloomiest possible library. So I mean, I think that, for me, that's also part of why this space in some capacity would be really neat to integrate, because it does have a quality that new construction tries to mimic, and we already have it, so.
Exactly.
B1, with or without colonnade is an option. I mean, so John Lisak is a fantastic architect. He understands this community very well and does a great job with historic architecture. I do want to point out that we're about to undergo some serious zoning development changes, and so we're going to be looking at a significant number of 5 to 7 story buildings on this block and next block over. And some people might have some even stronger feelings about retaining some pieces of history and pieces of what was South Pasadena. So the B1, I think, might be an interesting option, because then it is a shared space that then flows into the library space versus, like, I feel like if we have this be the entrance, we lose all the rest of the capabilities of that space.
More, I just want to be on El Centro. That's more.
Oh,
what I want.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I know, when I said I wanted to come through here, I think I'm just like, I just want to come from this side. We have to walk around the building personally.
The B1 entry plaza is
Well, I mean, they had said that as well, right? Like the approach to
Yes.
this building in general is from the northeast
East.
side, and that's just the way our traffic volumes are. So
Yeah, I think it's an important point not to lose it. Not that we are going to, I just wanted to re-emphasize, I think it's really important if we can get some entrance on El Centro.
Yeah, and I think the B1 does that. It does retain the historic 1930s entrance for kind of after-hour community events. So there could be, you know, a ceremonial aspect to that of, like, if there's an event in that large shared program or event hall, that someone could enter directly into that space and use that. And we've done that successfully before. And so that there is something nice about that. And then what the B1 does, you know, just first glance, does show more opportunities to potentially bring the senior programming down to that middle floor on the ground level of the entry plaza. So that's something that B1 option does provide that might be a little harder to accomplish in the B2 series.
I was just gonna point out something that I'm noticing, which is, you know, we talk about how beautiful the outside of this building is and how the ends are so beautiful. The entry plaza would literally be right out here. So when you come in, you would have this beautiful thing up on the right. Am I right when I say that?
Yeah, that is correct.
Kind of neat, right? Because right now, all we get is the front. We don't really.
right now, we
lose
kind of
the driveway
lose that beauty, because that's also our loading.
yes,
Right, exactly. So,
Yes.
you know, if you envision coming up.
which I'm sure the loaders appreciate.
I have noticed that twice.
It would be really pretty to have more frontage, and then your kind of entry plaza. This is right there, you know, I just think that would be really, now that I'm sort of trying to visualize what. And again, I think it gives us more of what we're calling ground level space to utilize.
And it gives us, to Tom's point, of the 2 parks, we still have the El Centro Park, and we have the Oxley Park, and we also have Diamond element.
Well, this is all.
An operation standpoint, B1 makes more sense to me. Because then you also have access to the kitchen, and the kitchen is downstairs. And that way, people, if they're doing an event here, they can also have access to the kitchen.
And then we also have, right, this B1 needs that there would be after hours access to this big kind of event space. Is that what that means? That the after hours?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
That's nice too. You know, people want to have a wedding or they want to, you know, come in, and this would be their door to do that.
Did we want to go to the slide, Dawn, where we had all of them in comparison? I think just to kind of recap
Oh, there we go. So what we did is we ghosted in the previous evaluation criteria for the A1 and A2 and the B1. We did not do a B2 without the colonnade. That was an option or a minor tweak that was added after the June 5th meeting. So we didn't want to be presumptuous to think that the evaluation criteria for B1 would directly apply to B2. But what we thought would be helpful is to again go through this exercise to sort of talk about the pros and cons and to hopefully help guide the committee in coming back with a recommendation, unless based on the discussion that we've had. It sounds like a lot of the committee members are still gravitating towards B1. I'm not sure if we've convinced everyone at this point, but this is a tool that we've used before, and we're happy to continue to edit and refine it to help get the group to come to a consensus. Oops, sorry, there's a bug.
More maybe stupid question, but looking at these next to each other, is there any opportunity to combine, not really combine, but combine B1 and B2 so that the right now we have, if you look at B2, it's got a long horizontal portion and a little tiny vertical portion. Could we make B1 a long vertical portion with a smaller horizontal portion that faces up here?
I don't know why.
If you look at B1 and B2.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're saying, Dean. You're saying just like how bring the B1 Fairview wing, bring it longer and there so we get more of the floor on the ground floor level, if you will, the entry level. Yeah, and this is the type of refinement, like Andrea said, our brains are already going, oh, yes, we could do this. Yes, we could do that. But in this next iteration, all of your comments, we will try and address them and incorporate them and, be able to explain how we can address these different things that you brought up tonight.
Yeah. So I think going back to posing the question, I know a number of the individual, I think we can definitely refine B1. I think we can come back with refinements to B2 to take some of the things that we really like about B1, but also to start to figure out what those, again, trade-offs are of using the historic entrance as the main point. What does that mean to that large community event space if that's not in the 1930s building? So we can come back and show those trade-offs. Is the group comfortable with the direction of B1 and B2? Do we need further discussion on A1 and A? Well, I know A1 is out. Do we need further discussion on A2 or any of the pieces that we like about A2 that might want to evolve or move into the B1 or B2 series?
And I don't know, Tom, can you repeat what you said about going to because part of the process is these site options. What we heard last time is the site options, the ad hoc committee wanted to make the decision on the site options. And so our community engagement, we were not asking for the community to weigh in on, these options or kind of the process to get to the preferred site plan, other than going through your Cultural Heritage Commission and your Planning Commission and having them provide input. Those are the public meetings where whatever your comments are and your direction to us, it can be vetted or collected input, likes and dislikes from them. They're more study sessions and not asking for action items. And so that was kind of the thought process behind that. So if you guys, take that into consideration and how you would, frame what you give the direction to us today as we take it to those, the commissions, the cultural heritage and the planning.
One A2 is a little bit more centered in, whereas B1 seems very far to the side, kind of eliminating green space on the Fairview side. So I've just asked if there's any way to move that around. So in A2, it looks like the library, the green box is further closer to diamond. Maybe we can have
So we bisecting the park. I mean, it's that green building that's a library.
yeah,
Too,
so
like-
so right now it looks
Yeah.
like the B1, it's really off and close to the Fairview side. It doesn't look like there's a walkway around there. And that's
It's
just
like it is now, probably with just this, the building goes right up to the, like, right to the sidewalk.
And you can see the borders, it matches the existing border up here.
Yeah. B2 is the one that really extends past where,
The footprint currently is, yeah, that one's.
yeah, and that's the one that really bifurcates it.
Yeah.
But I think, as discussed, we can sort of bring that back and maybe shift a little bit more of that to the east side where the building already does kind of come very close to the edge because the current park really wraps from the
I was-
north, west,
I
and then south, and
was-
not so much on the east.
I was looking at B1. And
Yeah.
I was talking about B1 and saying if B1 can just be moved over a little bit.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
So B1 looks like it doesn't have a walkway.
It does, it's just not drawn. So if you look at the red line on B1 of the existing building, our line is right at the same location, but we didn't draw at this scale the sidewalk along there, but if it needs a little bit more relief on this side, we can definitely do that as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's room.
Yeah, I think it was just one of the goals that was stated, I think
Mhm.
multiple times, was just that we'd like to have that walking path
Right.
all the
Yeah,
way around.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
that was the, fourth.
So yeah, so
Site.
when you come back with the greater details somewhere between
Mhm.
B1 and B2, just to remember that, that's a thing that we like. And then,
Yeah.
just to bring up Dean's thing again, is there any possibility of something like a B3 option where the yellow, the green, the blue create like a reverse C shape? And so, the little gray outdoor space engagement, instead of being external, would be in the middle of that C shape.
We can look at that.
It wouldn't be an incredibly deep opening in that C shape, but something so that it feels like there's creating an actual amphitheater almost, although not necessarily an amphitheater, but creating that shared communal space that then becomes a focal point for an outdoor fair or something.
I guess the question
That's
though,
what
the
create-
question I have is why? Because if we're gonna have this venue right across the street with the school district parking lot, which is gonna have music venues and other things, so just question of why we need the.
Because that's a commercial
Yeah,
thing.
The problem that we're trying to solve, we're trying to understand the problem.
Well, the logistic reason why I could see Dean's C shape being attractive would be, as they mentioned, it creates more surface area. So that would be more avenues of potential light bulb coming in. So it minimizes the boxes in the shared space. So when you create the C, right, and then your courtyard is here, and these are all potential windows. So you actually, it's the greatest amount of surface.
Yeah, the issue that we're fighting here with any C shape would be the grade. The middle of the C is where the grade goes from high to low.
Yeah,
So
that's what I don't know if it's possible.
it will be a bit challenging. We can explore it, but it's going to have some challenges from a grading. That the amphitheater in the middle will not open up to all levels because the northern edge, the top of the C will be at one grade and the bottom of the C is at a different grade, right? So We'll just have to figure out how that could manifest itself and still be accessible.
Could be concerned that by creating a C shape, you really internalize the outdoor space and you kind of take it away from the community and just make it used for the functions of the library, which
Yes.
is counterproductive.
Yeah, you will be moving park from the southern edge to the center because the size of the building is still the same. So the footprint will get closer to Oxley, right? Because we'll have to open up that C in order to create the center park space, we have to sort of trade the park space to the south in order, especially if we're maintaining the existing building, the 1930s building as the top of the C. Then it will sort of edge along Fairview, and then it will likely have to come a little bit further south, closer to Oxley than the current building does in order to provide the space in the middle of the C. So again, we're just going to be moving park space around.
I had actually sort of walked from the C shape and was thinking of literally sort of twisting B2 so that the short side is facing Fairview and the long side is facing Diamond. Not necessarily the exact same shape, but something more akin to that. But I don't know, it's just a challenge.
So we're working through all the Tetris pieces now.
Yeah, exactly. We are working throughout the Tetris pieces.
So do we still need a decision on if we want to pursue option A or, because we can vote on it, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I didn't sound like anyone was, A1 was out. So the question still poses is A2, is everyone feel comfortable dropping that so we can really focus on the B1 and the B2 and the variations that we've been discussing of those two?
Maybe you guys can help us think about, I mean, my concern about going to the community and leaving this idea of raising the whole thing is that we somehow upset people in a way that, people don't read, they don't pay attention. They're gonna tear down that building. Like when we lose support, if we even give a hint that that's something the committee is suggesting people might want to think about. I mean, I would love to raise the building. I'm with Tom and Bianca, but I just worry, does it undermine our whole project by letting that out?
I think B1, B2 is always an easier sell. Yeah. It's more words to explain to people. But the trade-offs and blah, blah, blah. Please listen to 5 hours of recordings.
See, I agree. To me, the only reason to push it forward is if B1 and B2 were unacceptable to anybody. But I think we have to default to preserve the historic building. Yeah. And based on everything I've heard, I'm not convinced that B1 and B2 or something with some variation of that is going to be horrible. So
I guess one thing that I think I lost track of, and it's probably the grade, is why A2 can't still be built with this building being the top part of.
That's what I'm afraid we're going towards. And to me, you would lose all the park because you're limited on, you would push the buildings towards Oxley where you really only are on El Centro, and that to me would be a tragedy.
No, because if you look at A2, literally, why can't the top part of the blue part be this building?
It's going to be a very crowded site, and that's kind of concerning.
If we blow up this wall and it opens up into the rest of the building.
I think
that are the issue, it's not this wall.
The functions that are happening A2 in the senior community room, we would have to just see how they would marry with the exact spaces in order to keep the contributing factors. I mean, once you blow out too many pieces of it, we've lost the historical integrity of it. And so at that point, I wish John was here to sort of say, well, why are you keeping it once you've sort of taken everything away from it? That makes it special, which is the size, the shape, the arches, the windows, the proportions. If you start eroding too much of the fabric away, what fabric are we actually saving?
The footprint of A2 and B1 really aren't that different, are they? I mean,
Oh, yeah, I mean, when option B considers putting programs on top of each other, which has some negatives too, but the positive is that you preserve site art. And I think that's what folks here really enjoy, and I wouldn't want to give that up.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking about B1, B2 and variations of those. Why don't we just let them spin with that?
yeah.
Rather than us design it.
I'm not hanging on to an A2.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should just move forward with the B1, B2 with the input, coming up with some ideas. I think we should just tonight, are we all okay? Just.
Yes, yes.
Let's just let go of A1 and A2.
So we have your direction. We decided some of us are bad, but I think it's just not realistic, and I do worry that putting that message out at all could just sink our whole ship
I do
accidentally.
think we need to have on the record that we talked about it, we discussed it, and we dismissed it because of numerous reasons.
I strongly agree, and when I watched the video of last night, you brought up that point too, even for some of the other options of, raising everything and all of that. I think that it's good that we need to, kind of like in high school math, we need to show our work, because people will come and try and second guess at the 11th hour.
Yeah, that's what I think we ended. Janet said that at the very end, like, we have to be transparent about how we got to what it is that we decided on, and be able to explain why those decisions were made. Well, that's great. I mean,
Great, thank you, everyone.
You're happy with that?
We have good direction. We got great feedback, and we will continue to work on those with your feedback. We'll also kind of summarize the process to the two commissions, and then we will be able to come back with any comments, suggestions, feedback that we get from them, in addition to what you've given us tonight, and include and show kind of the next iteration of those site options. Combination of B1, B2, and sounds like there's potentially coming a B3. We may have to change the names because they're all going to evolve so differently, but that's okay. So just to close out, community engagement round 2, we have drafted boards and we've given them to Kathy to do proofing on. And so basically what we're doing is, I think we have 6 boards, and so just staying with the same kind of look that we had before, but evolving it a little bit so people are clear. This is another round of engagement. We're asking different questions, giving the same background information that we gave before on board number 2, showing them what we heard in engagement number 1. So it's summarizing all that good input here. And then as we look at our next 2 boards, what we're asking for them to weigh in on is site design values and building design values. And so we're giving them options as we look at natural planting versus formal gardens, informal plazas versus civic plazas, flexible site for gatherings, integrated site furniture, and you can see fixed site furniture versus flexible lawn, social spaces versus quiet spaces. And then as we're looking at the addition in the B series, you can see we're looking at kind of building design values and what direction is the community priority, either contemporary versus traditional, bold versus timeless, modern building materials versus natural building materials, colorful accents, neutral colors. And I've got to move my one computer so I can see the other 2, transparent and open entrances versus grand and formal entrances. And so Kathy has these boards. She hasn't had a chance to proof them yet. I believe you all have copies in your handouts as well. And I'm wondering just in term and light of time this evening. Do we want to take the time to go through them as a group or have individual responses given back to Kathy, to given, back to the design team? Any thoughts on that?
Could you, I can't read some of the stuff,
I think
it looks like there's
pictures-
colors. If it would be possible maybe to send us, with each one as an individual or.
Yeah, no, we can as PDFs.
It's digital, so
Yeah.
It's hard to see.
I don't want to print all
Just
that.
digital, yeah, just.
Yeah, I think Kathy has the PDF files now, right, Kath?
They're,
Yeah.
they're gigantic though, so I'll look at them and talk to Justin. But are we suggesting that we're gonna ask you guys to get into like the nitty gritty of these and talking about the language that we're using, or what are we asking you to do? I just wanna know what I'm gonna ask you.
No, no,
Get back to me.
I think she was asking us if we wanted to look at it.
Yeah, so this is where, if you have any comments, I think this is what we had laid out for this round of engagement. If you have additional thoughts, you think that, you don't want us to ask about one of these and you think a different option is a better option, I think that's what we wanted to hear. I don't know, you had a lot of input on the first round of boards, and so don't want to not have that be an option for the committee.
Okay, we'll send it out and then you guys can just email in when.
That's just, and I apologize, one quick question. On the third where it says what we heard in round one, and you show 1, 2, 3, there were more options than that, right? So you're kind of showing the top 3, or was that?
They're showing page 7 and 8. See, this is the survey results. Page 7 and 8.
Right, but I think even in those, were those all of the options for people, or were there others? When I look at this, and I see number 4, it looks like, okay, that's last place, and maybe it is, but if there was 8 options, then it's in the top half.
It's the top percentage.
Yeah,
Right.
we can add that clarifier on there. So if you'd like it to, yeah.
It's not a big deal, but people will, especially since I'm assuming some of the number 4s will make it into the final plan possibly. I don't want people to think that it was last.
It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the top.
Yeah.
Top of the crop.
And the only thing that just jumped at me right away is, I hope people realize this is the second round. I don't want them to think, oh, I already did that. Because people move so quickly, they're just like scanning fast. And it's like sort of similar to what they already maybe saw or did, especially in the in-person component, if that's.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do have the large on the top. It says community engagement round 2, and it says what we heard in round 1. So we were definitely trying to make that bold. And I think we've changed the color of the boards as well. We kind of went more towards the green, I thought, on this one, where in the first round we had blue.
Yeah, we changed the bottom color to be the green.
Question.
Yes.
So I can only speak for myself. I think the way you've laid out, I just can't see the pictures, but the concepts of this or that, this or that, this or that, I think that's great. It will get us the community input that we're looking for to answer some of the questions we've been torturing ourselves with the last hour and a half.
I just had one comment on the building design value, since we just decided we're gonna go with B1, B2, so we're gonna keep this colonnade outside. Should that might be a little confusing then, like you get down to like the modern building materials. People gotta, how are we incorporating that we're doing B1, B2, the existing building?
So the intention was not to do that. And as you can see, where we show modern building materials, it's probably very hard for you to see. I'm not sure how I can zoom in on it. We actually show the modern materials are an addition to a historical building right here. And so we tried to be sensitive where it says bold style, that's a bold style next to, it's an addition to a historical building. And so we were trying to, where we went with more of the larger statements, tried to show them in context with historical.
Thank you.
And I think we can always address that in the leading paragraph. What building design style should the reimagined community facility have? We could sort of state that this doesn't pertain to the 1930s building, but this,
Yeah.
you know, we could always clarify that this is for the addition to that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
We tried to keep that same kind of, you know, in addition, you know, it's always going to be welcoming, accessible, sustainable, have indoor, outdoor, you know, as we did in the first round, wanted to make sure that there are certain givens that we know the building's going to have, and then there are options of this or that for different, for other pieces of it. So we can, now that we know we're only in the addition world and not a whole new building, we can be a little bit more specific in that wording. And the good thing is the scale here is so small, but as you know, these boards are huge for the in-person, so the pictures will be much larger. And when we're on the online survey, you know, you'll have people's screens. If they do it on their phone, they have a slight disadvantage. You know, the images can only be as big as the phone, but when they do it on a computer, right, we'll have the capability of making
And
the
the
images
phone
bigger.
does, yeah, the phone does allow you to zoom in too if you
Yeah,
touch
that's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can zoom in and out. So
One last comment, because I won't be here next month. I would prefer you use the phrase new construction rather than addition, because addition sounds like we're retaining everything and building something onto it, as opposed to new construction that implies that we're building something entirely new that will be attached to.
yeah, sometimes we say to the new addition. But yes, we can definitely wordsmith that. After you provide your comments to us, we can definitely work with library and recreation staff to incorporate all those.
Round two, are we doing the same thing, getting the word out, or how is that?
We haven't talked about that yet. I'm hoping that, yes, I mean, we need to get the word out, but I'm hoping that we did enough groundwork the first time that people are kind of knowing this is still happening and coming, so we don't have to do quite as hard to the community. I think our biggest success was the kiosk out in the community, even more than the work we did going to entities or organizations. But yeah, we'll have to do that and have a plan, but I don't know if it has to be as extensive as it was in round one.
It's gonna be cold and wet.
What's that?
It'll be cold and wet, hopefully.
In August?
Well, we're talking
No, we're gonna be, you know, we're always in the park, like, and all of this summer stuff, so we'll connect with a lot of people. I think that would be. Yeah, I think you guys have, do you have any other slides you wanna just quickly do next steps, or?
No, that's just what you saw before. But thank you. Very good discussion. Lots of great input tonight.
Very tolerant with us, and I appreciate that.
Let me just make sure we have no public comment. Sean, do you have any online hands raised? And do you have any in-person cards? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it's, where's here? Okay, if the current community room is converted into an entrance lobby, it will need to be replaced with another room of equal grandeur and spaciousness. Meetings and events do use the entire room, both with the sitting arrangement as in the Athens presentation and in the standing format as in displays concerning the housing element or shown by Public Works. Something to keep on mind with that. A friend of mine was also concerned about the senior center being on the second floor, so they had to use stairs. You guys already covered that. Just let you know someone else was concerned about that. If we have higher buildings around, not just 2-story, but 3- and 5-story buildings around, is it worth considering adding a third floor to this building? A very small third floor for staff only. You can have the setback so that you can't really see it from the ground, and that would allow more use of the lower floors for the public. And it will have great views.
Thank you, Tucker. I think we can adjourn the meeting as long as there are no committee member communications or staff communications. I think everyone's ready to call it a night. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting until our next meeting, which is August 7th at 7. We'll probably do it in this room again. And that's that. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.